Hi, this is Daniel.
And I'm Ruth. Hello.
We're back on Israel Uncovered, and a lot has been happening. I've been abroad for a couple of weeks, still struggling with the jet lag. And today the one thing we wanted to talk about is protests. There's a lot of protests around at the moment, and just kind of like, on the one hand, what are people feeling here? And what do we feel about all the different global protests? Not just here, but also like in Gaza, in Turkey, in the US, people throwing bombs at like Tesla cars, like all of these different uprises.
Yeah.
And
I haven't seen that actually.
that was yesterday. So
was
like
it?
3 people went into a Tesla dealership and they started burning cars and throwing Molotov cocktails at it. So again, the US very swiftly said this is an act of internal terrorism.
Yeah.
And they dealt with it. Of course, everyone started saying, well, why is it terrorism when this and that is not categorized? Everyone starts with the politicking of it. But I mean, again, they didn't go to the Tesla dealership to steal the cars. They went to destroy and to cause terror.
Yeah, terror basically.
That's the definition of terrorism.
But what has been incredible, I think, in the last 24 hours are the people of Gaza who are uprising against Hamas, which we just have not seen in really forever.
Yeah, I don't think it's getting the coverage internationally deserves.
It's not.
But it's a major shift.
Major shift. And, we know that the BBC has not reported on it.
Has it not?
No.
Okay, I mean, I don't watch it.
Sky News Australia, they are all over it and commending the people of Gaza for their acts of courage, which, not necessarily the easiest thing to digest, but I think it is very significant what is happening.
Well, they're risking their lives to protest
They
that.
are.
And I think that's the difference. I think now people are going to start making the typical moral equivalency. So they'll go like, well, there's tens of thousands of people in Tel Aviv protesting Netanyahu. There's tens of thousands of people protesting for Hamas. Is the same. And it's not, because the courage that it takes from someone in Gaza to protest against Hamas, they're risking their lives. Someone in Tel Aviv, they are bored on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, or they have strong belief. There's zero
we're
risk.
We're able to freely.
Or in the US or in the UK, you can go and
scream whatever you want in the streets.
Yeah,
basically.
you can stand outside the White House and say Trump is a dictator, and you're fine, and you sleep fine that night. In Gaza, you don't. So that's why I think when we see that type of protest, yes, it does take a lot of courage, but then also they've had it. I mean, they don't want the war. And again, I don't think it's necessarily that they love Israel or they have, this view for like peaceful coexistence. But what they do know is that Hamas is the root source of all their pain and suffering.
Yeah, well, that's now becoming really clear, isn't it?
Well, but it always was, though, to me.
It was to us, but not to the rest of the Western world, for sure.
Well, that's because they went with the propaganda coming out of Gaza saying that, this is resistance, liberation, freedom movement, and that everyone on Gaza is on board, and they're not.
No.
But now...
And you've been saying that all along.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I think now they're at a point where, like, they've got nothing else to lose. That's why they're taking to the streets.
They've got nothing else to lose, but I think what's also important to still remember is the scenes we certainly saw on October 7th of all the celebrations and all of that happening. I mean, that was... again, we don't know if that was all Hamas propaganda.
No, that did happen.
That did happen.
And if October 7th happened again, I believe it would happen again in the streets of Gaza. They just fed up at Hamas because they lost the war.
Yeah, they lost the war.
That's why, because they didn't deliver on their promise to destroy Israel, kill all the Jews. Whatever they promised, that's what they were voted into power.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like remained and established themselves as this totalitarian regime. But ultimately, what people of Gaza wanted was for them to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. And because they failed at doing that, now they're angry at them. So I don't think it comes from a place of love or peaceful coexistence. It comes from a place of anger at the government not delivering on their mission and vision to destroy Israel.
Yeah. Either way, I think that it's very significant, and I think we need to make noise about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's about making noise, but I do think it's a massive
highlighting it, actually.
Yeah, it is a tipping point because that showcases also the weakness of Hamas and how weak they are right now, that people are no longer scared of protesting against it. I mean, they will be scared, and there's still like a huge risk involved, and they're still risking their life, but because Hamas and the leadership and the military capabilities have been weakened so much, they can do it. And one of the interesting things that I saw at those protests was that, like, it's all men. There's no women.
No, there were women. There were
Really?
a lot of children. There were
Yeah, but I didn't see women in the pictures. I saw this photo and it was all men. So that actually, to me, says that it's genuine, because women don't walk around freely or go to these multitudinary events. Only when it's like the Hamas propaganda and you have like the, you know, like the mother in the hospital and the kids and that. So like when it's actually, you know, what do you say? Like a grassroots. When it's a grassroots protest, it's going to be all men. So to me, actually, that says that it's a genuine grassroots movement against Hamas, and it's not something staged. When it goes into being like it's all women, children, journalists, that's not true.
No.
And I saw a picture yesterday on CNN, actually, and I was like, yes, there were a few children, but it wasn't like in the Hamas video where there was all the children at the front, all the women at the front.
No, it was like genuine. It was genuine.
Right.
You know, like in terms of
like any other protest, but not in the fake way that Hamas does
No,
it, which
exactly,
is like all the children at the front,
exactly.
all the women at the front, and like when it's not propaganda, actually in a society like Gaza, like in any, like, you know, religious Muslim society, like women will not go to these political protests. So actually, again, I don't agree with it, but I think what it shows is that they are genuine grassroots movements.
Yeah. And we've had a lot of protests here.
Yes, we have.
To do with the government again.
Well, that's never going to stop. It's like in the US. They're always going to have a reason to protest against Trump.
Yeah, but I think the firing of Ronan Bar, head of the Shin Bet, and Swiftly, the Attorney General, is an indication that this government, this Israeli government, is quite intent on dismantling Israeli democracy.
You believe that? I don't. I think they want to fire those people, but I don't think their mission.
I think Netanyahu has done everything he possibly can to avoid taking responsibility for October 7th, and he's doing everything he can to push the blame onto other organisations, which, by the way, everyone has their part to play.
I would agree. I would agree with that, but I would say that every politician will try to like push the blame. But
I'm now sick of Netanyahu being this kind of who just cannot take responsibility when October 7th happened on his watch. He needs to go. And he will not take responsibility. And that, for me, is difficult to...
What politician does? I mean, did George Bush take responsibility for 9/11? Did like whoever, Tony Blair, take responsibility for like the attacks on London? Like, what politician do you expect to say, it happened under my watch, it is my fault, I resign? They actually resigned for other reasons. Let's say, for example, they were able to agree a budget, which is a massive milestone.
Yeah.
So they're still able to function, and he still has the coalition. Again, love him or hate him, I get it that you'd like him to resign or that you don't like him, but from saying that he didn't take responsibility as he should, or that he's pushing the blame, both things I actually agree with you on. I agree that he's pushing the blame like every politician does, and I agree that he hasn't the kind of like the mea culpa moment. Fine. But from there to go and say that he's on a mission to dismantle Israeli democracy is quite the leap.
It is. It's just, I know what the fight I was in before October 7th.
You know the what, sorry?
The fight I was in.
Right.
Before
it was
October
the same narrative.
7th. It was the same thing.
And the same narrative with Trump.
And what I'm finding difficult and conflicting, and I've shared this, is that I'm not taking to the streets at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is largely because I really do feel like it is feeding into the hands of our enemies. They want to see Israelis protesting out on the streets, ranting against their government. demanding the hostages come home. We all want the hostages home, but the pressure, I'm now very clear that the pressure needs to come from the international community onto Hamas to release the hostages.
I agree with that.
But that's not going to stop Israelis taking to the streets and still...
Anyone that is frustrated, you know, it's like Turkey. You know, when people are frustrated, they take to the streets. I also think that all these things are massively arranged and organized anywhere, whether they happen in Turkey or in the US or whatever, or in the UK or in a campus. I don't believe in spontaneous protest myself. I have this theory that, like, you know, maybe there's some exceptions. There are some exceptions that I think are true, but not many. I don't think the movement here, I think, is so calculated. The narrative is so in line with everything else. And again, when you see the parallels between what Hamas says and what the protester says, all the bullet points match. And also what you see, what I said about Trump and what you say about Bibi, you know, literally you ask any lefty in the US why they hate Trump, they'll repeat the same words that you just said. He's on a mission to dismantle American democracy.
Yeah, which I don't agree with.
Well, that's fine. But my point is, I don't care anyone agrees or disagrees with, but my point is the narrative that is textbook propaganda in my eyes.
For me, the problem I have and why I see the dismantling of democracy is because it's so easy to do here. Because there is no constitution.
It's more fragile.
It's more fragile and there's no constitution in place. So they are able to change whatever laws they want as well as they like when they want.
Do you think Netanyahu will stay after the war?
I'd like to think not.
Yeah, I don't think he will.
You don't think he will?
100% no.
I think he needs a rest, to tell you the truth.
I think he needed a rest before he got elected last time. That's what I felt. I've been feeling that for a long time. But then again, I don't think he's kind of like moving these pieces to stay until he dies, which is that type of like vibe.
Which is Erdogan.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. or Putin, or like, you know, who's going to be in until like 2030 something.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, when people make those parallels and those comparisons, I just don't see it. And again, that's why, like, if you think he's on a mission to dismantle democracy, that's fine. I just, you know, we can agree to disagree. What I think is going to happen is Netanyahu is going to go. Like, actually, most prime ministers did after a war. Like, what prime minister is going to be popular with their people after a massive war? Yeah. Nobody is. Like, Zelensky's not going to be popular. Netanyahu's not. Nobody's going to be popular.
Yeah.
But, and by the way, the same way you say people are happy when they see Israelis protest is the same way that you are happy when you see Gazans protest against Hamas.
Yeah.
So that's what, like, is also strategically placed. And by the way, I'm also not.
I think what we saw in Gaza yesterday is extraordinary. We've not seen anything like that.
I agree, but I'm also not close to the idea that some power, whether it's Israel or somebody else, is also facilitating those things, so that what starts as a grassroots movement picks fire or protects the protesters, or, you know, encourages for the uprise over there against Hamas. So that's what, like, yes, it felt like grassroots, but I'm always skeptical about protests. That's my, you know, I'm always, every time I see like a mass of people, I'm like, there's an agenda behind it. And the other thing I was going to say is that I think when Netanyahu leaves power, which I think he will, and I don't think democracy is under threat personally, I think a real right-wing government will land in Israel. Really? And everyone that moans and cries and screams and takes the streets saying you're a dictator, right-wing, fascist, whatever, the same Trumpian derangement, whatever, I think they're going to get the wake-up call of their lives when the majority of the country who've had it will elect a really
far right.
A real right-wing government.
You don't think a Naftali Bennett will get into power?
I don't know, because I think it's too early, because I think, but again, I haven't seen his agenda. So it will all depends of like who's going to be presenting their agenda for the next election, which I don't know when it will be. But I think the people of Israel, outside of the Tel Aviv bubble, will choose a very right-wing government, understandably. And by the way, you know, just like they are choosing all over Europe.
Yeah.
Because people feel this is getting out of control. And everyone that moans that, you know, this is right, or that moans that, for example, like, I don't know, that Rishi was right-wing. I mean, he's not.
No, Rishi was very
Right, but I feel Netanyahu is central, actually.
I agree, and I've always felt that way.
Right, it's just his coalition.
I mean, I'm also very, it's interesting because I just want to share actually my political views, because I consider myself centre-right in the UK.
Right.
And centre-left here. Centre-leaning left. That's not to say that So it's a bizarre thing, but I'm basically pretty centre. But
I'm extreme, actually. I consider myself far right in some issues and far left in others.
Okay.
And
really?
Yeah, and I'm always like issue-driven and never party-driven. So I have never had any affiliation to anyone, and my overall view of politics and politicians is like, they're all a bunch of clowns. So, you know, don't blame the clowns for being a clown. Just blame yourself for joining the circus.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
So I do have views that usually are quite extreme. You know, when it comes to like safety, security and stuff like that, I lean like very right. And when it comes like social like rights or like LGBT or like other stuff, I feel like very left. And in other stuff, which is like education, social security and things like that, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't think it should be totally privatized, but I also don't think every citizen needs to depend and rely on the government to, you know, all the kind of like crazy like education pension. So I think somewhere in the middle, but I don't think, you know, everything should be privatized. Absolutely not. I believe in free, for countries that can afford it, like free education and, you know, like subsidized transport and pensions for all people. Like, so I believe in that. I don't think it should be like all private, like in the US, but I'm also not like far left where like the whole world is dependent. They're just in misery dependent on the government, which is socialism.
Yeah. So how have you just been feeling generally over the last, I mean, I know you've been traveling.
I was in Vegas, so I was feeling great.
He's had a great trip.
I was in Arizona, I was in Vegas, I was all over the place. So it's been refreshing just spending a couple of weeks out of all the posters, propaganda, news. And like I said, like since after the first hostage release, the televised thing, I stopped watching news, and that applies to Israeli news, that applies to international news, British news, Spanish news. I'm done. Exactly, like the circus, putting the circus aside, I still know everything that happens. I also think when I came back, we've had a few rocket attacks.
Yeah, we have.
So I think it's important to say that even if it's misreported, people here are very worried, and once, twice a day, we still get a siren. I was in a restaurant, I had to stop in the middle of the meal to go to the basement of the restaurant to hide from a missile attack from Yemen.
I'd actually fallen asleep and didn't hear it.
Right. So
at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock. That's showing my age. I am 43.
And then I was also like at my parents, and it was really sad because I was in the staircase, and you see like all the kids with the parents waking up in the middle of the night and really scared, and the parents really scared, the kids really scared, really like out of. So that's still like a very sad reality that I just don't think gets reported enough. Which again, it's not that I'm offended if it gets reported or not, but for people that watch Israel Uncovered, they need to know that we're still in the thick of it.
We really are. We really are. And
people are really fed up by now.
Really fed up. And just need it. We just want some normality back in our lives, because we're not living in normal circumstances. So as much as we do crack on and we, you know, get on as much, the emotional toll of this war
is exhausting,
very draining, and it's really, I'd say it's very difficult to keep energy levels up and keep yourself motivated. And I certainly need a lot of rest, really, from just all the just everything coming at you.
It's draining.
It's draining.
And going back to protests, what's your view on like kind of like grassroots versus organized, agenda-driven? By the way, there was a report this week that they found Hamas sources funding a lot of the university campuses in America.
Okay.
So now they've literally found the funding, which again, to me was so obvious because they all turned up with the same tent en masse within 24 hours. So everything was so calculated and organized that was like, come on, anybody that thinks this is like students caring about anything doesn't know anything. But in terms of, for example, like Turkey, or, you know, the US.
Turkey, that must be organized, but again, they are
fed up.
They're fed up, and hundreds of thousands were on the streets.
Yeah, it's crazy. The footage was insane.
Yeah. And I think power to the people. That's that's honestly how I feel. And it's how I feel here. I support the protesters here. I really do. I support the hostage families demanding the hostages out. I support.
Yeah, but the protest against Netanyahu are not for the hostages.
I know. I'm saying I support. There are
various
protests going on. I support both the anti-government protesters and I support the hostage families protesting for the.
I think everyone in the country, by and large, supports that one.
But for whatever reason, I'm not taking to the streets simply because I don't want to feel like a useful idiot. And I do. If I take to those streets, and this is different from before October 7th. Now, if the war ends and this government is still intent on dismantling democracy, which is how I'm seeing things, then I will be back out on those streets.
Okay. I'll be at home eating Doritos in front of Netflix. I'm just lazy.
Melted cheese and guacamole on top?
Probably.
Yeah? Okay.
So yeah,
I'm quite a fan of those actually.
So yeah, I'm just not political like that. So I'll have a strong opinion, but I mean, to me, the action I would take is voting. But besides, and even voting, I'm always like, every day time I go, I'm like.
For me, it's the weakness and fragility of the laws here is it's on a thread, and that's what bothers me. There's nothing secure about it.
I don't think it's on a thread. I think if you feel like this now, in 2 years' time,
it's gonna get worse.
When a right-wing government arrives, you're gonna be pulling your hair out. And that's how I feel. That's my prediction.
Oh, that's something to look forward to.
Well, it's like when I have the friends, I have like very left-wing friends that were crying on the streets of San Francisco the first time that Trump won, and the other, and after Biden actually, even before Trump won, he's like, she said to me, my friend, she's like, I miss the days of George Bush and I cannot even believe I'm saying this.
Yeah.
So I think all these people protesting in 2 years' time, they're going to be saying, I miss the days of Netanyahu and I cannot believe I'm saying this. Yep. Well, what do you think of Trump before he got elected?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've become quite the fan.
Right. I think he's been brilliant, by the way.
But that's also because he gets shit done.
Exactly.
And that's been very refreshing to see. I've just seen so much mediocrity and laziness and things not getting done and just
not
in
keeping
so
promise.
many arenas, in so many areas,
right,
that actually to see somebody who's just made huge changes and is making a difference already.
Well, people are not used to leaders keeping their promises. So he's just doing what he said he would do. So everyone is shocked because they're like, oh my God, the people are not used to, it's like, for example, like in the UK, for 3 years, this guy says he's not going to raise the council tax by a penny. Now all of a sudden he's going to say he's going to increase this, then all of that. So people are, which by the way, is also not that strange. Same with the Rishi. Like, you know what I mean? They all promise stuff and people are kind of used to not do anything and not fulfill them. I think Trump he's been so laser focused on fulfilling the promises and the agenda that he was voted for. That is, like you said, is refreshing. And again, you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but you cannot disagree with the fact that he's doing exactly what he promised his voters to do. Yeah. And that's amazing.
It is. And it's just something it's really kind of irking me because it's at the back of my head all the time. And something where my opinion has really changed over the last 18 months that I just wanted to mention. And that is a two-state solution. So something that I had always been an advocate for before this war was a two-state solution. I now feel, with everything that's happened, that is no longer viable. And that's also been quite a conflicting thing for me to sort of process.
Really?
Yeah, it has.
For me, it wasn't.
No?
No, because I never believed in one.
You never believed in it?
Well, to have a two-state solution, you need two parties that want a two-state solution.
You do.
So when you have
a party that doesn't,
a party that for 50 years tells you from the river to the sea, like the only difference is that now people have cleaned their ears and started listening to what they've been telling you all along.
Exactly. So, I think I was always
hopeful,
in the hopeful,
wishful thinking.
Always hopeful that there would be a party to to partner with on that. And I now don't think it's possible.
If Palestinian leadership wanted a two-state solution and Israel wanted a two-state solution, that'd be great. And I'd be like, yeah, of course. There's two people that need to iron out some details.
Yeah.
But when you have one party that for 70, 80 years tells you no, from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, whatever, then it's like, well, you have to take them at their word. And I actually think the biggest mistake of Israel, also for October 7th, also for the past zonka years, is not taking people at their words. I always say, I find it I find it easier to speak to a jihadist that knows what they want and says what he thinks than to a European diplomat that is in this murky grey area of what should be and expectations and stuff, and saying things that Palestinians don't want, things that Israelis don't want or should want. So at least, you know, when you speak to, like, by the way, I met some great Palestinians when I was in the US, and I met Syrians, Palestinians. So I always, like, you know, friends of my family. So I actually find it a lot more refreshing to sit with someone and to have a conversation where we can agree to disagree with people that have also been to the Middle East than when these European people that think they know but they don't know, they've never been here, and speak on behalf of Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, non-Jewish, and try to, and basically, because the problem is they just analyze everything through their lens of their lived experience, and they've never been here, and it's completely different, and what people think here is completely different, what people in Gaza think is completely different. So they always try to compare. That's why when in Spain they compare it to, like, it's like the Basque country, or like the Catalonian independence, and like in the UK they compare it to Northern Ireland, and it's so different. I mean, comparing those two issues and trying to say, well, in the same way that was solved, it was solved here, it will be solved here. And I'm like, no, it's completely different. And comparing them actually doesn't help anybody. I don't think. That's why, like, when I speak to someone from Syria or someone of Palestinian descent or whatever, Lebanese, like, I find it refreshing, actually. And I find it much easier to agree to disagree than somebody going to this murky, wishy-washy two-state solution, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway. So we'll keep protesting or not protesting, or watching the protest or not watching the protest. But what's for sure is that we'll be back.
We will be back.
More episodes. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.